Hi everyone, Quiveen here from the comfort of my kitchen. In today's video, we are going to have a look ahead into the month of July. We'll start with the sunset early in July. Of course, early in the month, not too much has changed from June. There won't be too much of a difference between the end of June and the start of July, but things will get more different as we push later into the month. So here in the evening of sunset, our view from the city definitely lets us see Scorpius. There's Antares right above the south, and this is as early as 10:30, so quite early in the evening. And we can see the summer triangle is reasonably high in the sky. It's still going to stay with us for pretty much the entire night because we are still in summertime. Parts of it will set, but then again, we're going to have such a short night, even now that we've moved into July. We're still close enough to the summer solstice that the night will be reasonably short. There's the summer triangle coming to the middle of the sky a little after 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. We can see Saturn and Mars here nice and early in the morning. So this is just about 3 o'clock in the morning, which is quite early, but you can see Saturn's nice and far from sunrise and reasonably high in the sky. Mars and Jupiter then are a little bit closer. We can see here the moon, which will be next to the planets for the early part of the month, and then again as we get into early next month. So pushing a little bit closer to the middle of July, we can see how much better the planets look, how much easier it is to see them. Because we're moving past the summer solstice, the sun won't be coming up quite as early when we get into July, so we'll have a little bit longer to see these planets, and more importantly, to take a look at these planets through a telescope. So Jupiter is quite low in the sky here. You will be looking through a lot of atmosphere, but the sky is at least dark enough to use a telescope. And again, this is our view from the city. We'll move backwards, back towards sunset, now that we're about halfway through the month. And you can see that Saturn is in the sky, up and visible, as early as midnight. Now, of course, close to midnight, it's getting reasonably close to the horizon, but it is there. You don't have to wait all night long for Saturn to come into view. We'll push back just a little bit more. There's the moon just after coming around to the other side of the sun, so it will be there in the evening. And we can see that as the sun is going down, the star Antares will be past south by the time it actually gets dark. So what constellations we're seeing and when we're seeing them, they are continuing to change. We're just starting to see bits of Sagittarius there as early now as 10:30. So we don't have to wait particularly late for those constellations or the glow of the Milky Way to be in the sky. But of course, we won't see the glow of the Milky Way unless we're in the countryside. So we're going to push out to the countryside here at just a little after 10:30. The moon is there in the sky. The sun has just gone down, so the Milky Way will be tricky to see, almost impossible to see. But there are plenty of stars up and visible, nice and clear. And because Sagittarius and Scorpius are already up above the horizon this early, we know that the Milky Way is passing through the southern horizon this early as well. We'll have to push a little bit later for the moon to leave the sky and things to get a little bit darker, but this is the glow of the Milky Way before midnight. So now that we've pushed that little bit further ahead past the summer solstice, you can see the glow of the Milky Way just a little bit earlier in the night and under darker conditions. So we won't have as much of a residual glow of sunset around the northern horizon. We're not really going to get that twilight extending from sunset to sunrise once we're through to the middle of July. We're too far past the middle of the summer. Of course, it will still continue to get hotter. And there is Saturn. Now that we're through to the middle, we can see that by midnight in the middle of July. And Saturn already looks nice and clear now that we're in the countryside. We'll keep turning over towards the east because in the morning, the planets are one of the nicer things to catch. We can also see the Pleiades there very, very clearly in the morning. And Jupiter looks really clear and bright. This is 2 o'clock in the morning, so you're still going to have to either stay up late or get up quite early to catch these things in the sky. We can also clearly see the Hyades there of Taurus. So it's, there's no prizes for guessing which planet, which constellation the planets Jupiter and Mars are in. With the Pleiades there and Aldebaran and the Hyades there, they are definitely in Taurus early in the morning here. We can even push a little bit later, given that we're in the countryside and it's only the light of the sun without the extra light pollution. There's all of those planets still visible as we approach 4 o'clock. And just as we come up to 4 o'clock, Mars definitely getting challenging to see, Saturn getting quite faint, but Jupiter is still quite bright and obvious as late as 4 o'clock once we're through just to the middle of July. We will keep pushing forward. We will push to the end of July, but we can see that Jupiter is also much higher from the sunrise. But at this point in the month, I would, if you want to look at Jupiter with a telescope, go earlier in the morning, closer to 3 o'clock, simply because there is a bit too much light this close to sunrise. We don't have to push earlier as we move into the future anymore, because the sky will get darker at the same time as we approach the end of the month. So here we are, 30th and 31st. We can see Jupiter, Mars, the Moon, the Pleiades, and the Hyades there all together. And we can also see that Jupiter and Mars have gotten closer together. That's a trend that will continue as we come into August, as you can see there. But I will talk about that when we are looking all the way into August. It should be a crescent moon this close to the sunrise. So we'll move things a little bit backwards, a little bit into the night to make things darker. Here we are, 3 o'clock. They are still reasonably low in the sky, but they're high enough to take a closer look with a telescope. And if we do zoom in here, we have to compete with the light of the moon, of course, which is going to make things a little bit more difficult. But this is a fantastic view. We've got Jupiter, Aldebaran with the Hyades, Mars, the Moon, the Pleiades. Uranus is out there, but of course, Uranus is practically impossible to see. With a bit of magnification, you might see Uranus as a little bit of a dot there, but it is very tricky. Removing the moon, you can see Uranus there at this level of magnification reasonably clearly, but if you were just using your eyes, it will be almost impossible, especially with the light of the moon there. Even when it's just a crescent, the moon still makes quite a bit of a difference, especially to the objects that are near it in the sky. We're going to push back now towards sunset at the end of the month, because we'll see Saturn being visible in the sky much earlier, and we'll see the glow of the Milky Way. It'll be a little bit more past south again by the time it would get visible, or by the time it gets clear. So we can see Saturn there about to leave the sky at 10:30 at the end of the month, and the glow of the Milky Way disappearing really as it lines up with south here. And it's still quite dark here at just 10 o'clock, and even at 9 o'clock we should still see some stars. So the evenings are finally getting a little bit darker. The day won't feel quite as long by the time we're through to the end of July. So here we are, 9 o'clock. It's still quite bright. It'll take another month for that to change. But even as early as 9 o'clock, we can see stars like Antares and the Summer Triangle, as long as we're out in the countryside. So back into the city once more. Somewhere around here, to give something similar to what we'd see in Cork City. And now it's a little bit tougher. Vega, of course, is one of the brightest stars. Vega is up there. It is the 0 magnitude star, so there's only a few stars that come into negative numbers brighter than Vega. So we'll have to go a little bit later before we get more stars in the sky. Of course, we're not going to see the Milky Way from the city. There's Saturn coming up basically at 10 o'clock. But you would need a very clear horizon like the one that's being simulated here. And you really would want to wait to get a good view of Saturn until it is at least this high in the sky. Just a little bit higher will make things a little bit better. Of course, if you want to get Saturn close to its peak height in the sky, it will pretty much reach it before the sun starts to rise. So we can see here Saturn almost directly above the south at 3 o'clock by the end of the month of July. So Saturn is definitely going to get easier to observe, easier to see its rings, everything like that. So we'll take one last close look in at this group now that the moon is an even narrower crescent. You can still see quite a lot, even with the extra light of the moon. And a lot of those details, of course, will disappear as the sun continues to rise. But the Hyades are up high enough to be seen with the naked eye, at least Aldebaran, and we should see a couple of the Pleiades. It's far enough away from sunrise that we will get to see those things before they get washed out by the sun. And in the city, yeah, by half four, Jupiter's definitely the only thing left. And even a little before that, a little closer to 4 o'clock here, Mars, Saturn, they are still a little bit tricky to catch with the naked eye. So just before finishing up entirely, we'll take a quick look into the northern sky. So we can see here, we'll go back a little bit closer to sunset. Here we go. So this is at the end of the month of July, just as the sun is setting. And we can see the plough there on one side, very much to the northwest of the North Star, and Cassiopeia there over in the east. So if we come all the way back to the start of the month, we can see there it's getting quite brighter if we're keeping or much brighter if we're keeping the time the same. But we can see there, as the sun is going down, sticking with the same time, they're in very different positions. And if we move time back to get the sky reasonably dark, and you can see here at the beginning of the month, you might get a little bit of that twilight glow peeking above the north. There's our plough, there's Cassiopeia. If we move back to the end of the month, we'll get to see that shift in the position of the constellations. So you can go back through my previous videos where I talk a little bit more about why these things are shifting as we move around the sun. I did a video on different ways of measuring the day, such as the sidereal day. But if you found this video interesting, I post a video like this roughly every month and a general video about space twice a week. So if you enjoyed this video, please do like it. And if you think you might like this kind of video, please do subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can also read a little bit of this information on my website, queeveenscontent.ie. So hopefully I'll see you next time.